Ashley Olsen's day began like any other. Yet, in the heart of Neo-Chicago, a city of gleaming towers and shimmering skyways, no day was truly ordinary. Even as a low-profile data analyst, she moved among the cutting-edge technologies that defined this era: holographic billboards pulsing with vibrant advertisements, drones weaving intricate patterns overhead, and autonomous vehicles gliding silently along magnetic highways. Her apartment hovered above the city, a crystalline structure reflecting the neon lights below. Ashley's crimson-hued curtains flickered. As she stirred from her sleep, the faint hum of the city entering her consciousness. She was ordinary by most standards, yet there was something about her obsidian hair cascading like liquid midnight, her striking red eyes, an unusual combination even in a genetically enhanced world that caused strangers to glance twice. She didn't flaunt it. Ashley preferred to blend, to observe quietly, to move unnoticed. Her morning ritual was meticulous: a nutrient-dense breakfast synthesized from lab-grown ingredients, a short meditation with AI-guided focus exercises, and a review of the day's schedules projected across her retinal display. Yet beneath the calm, she felt the subtle itch of restlessness, a yearning for something more than the monotony of spreadsheets, corporate memos, and digital audits. At the Global Data Consortium, Ashley navigated her day with quiet efficiency. Her colleagues rarely noticed her, though whispers more occasionally traveled. Her intelligence was sharp, her intuition uncanny. But for all her brilliance, Ashley had learned long ago that the world of high-tech corporations was as much about appearances and influence as it was about skill. In this era, knowing the right people, or more importantly, knowing what they wanted before they knew it themselves, was power. And then, unexpectedly, her monotony cracked. A new project had arrived, a high-level audit of sensitive AI integrations. She was paired with Dorian Vey, the charismatic CEO of a rival corporation. The first glance exchanged between them was electric, subtle, yet undeniable, an invisible current that hinted at the turbulence to come. He smiled politely, but there was something unreadable in his gaze. Confidence, yes, but also a hint of calculation. Ashley felt her pulse quicken. For the first time in years, her day did not feel ordinary. As she returned to her terminal, the city below hummed with infinite possibilities. The drones flickered past, the skyways glistened, and somewhere, hidden beneath layers of neon and steel, Ashley sensed that her life was about to be rewritten, not by technology or duty, but by intrigue, ambition, and the unpredictable currents of the heart. The next morning, Neo-Chicago gleamed beneath a pale violet dawn, its towers slicing the sky like crystalline knives. Ashley navigated the elevated walkways with practiced ease, her black hair flowing behind her as the wind from the hovering transports tousled it slightly. Even in this hyper-advanced metropolis, the city seemed alive, pulsing with data streams, holographic advertisements flickering in rhythm with unseen neural networks, and the distant hum of grav shuttles slicing through the air. Ashley's destination was the Vaytech Corporation's Innovation Hub, a monolithic structure of silver alloy and adaptive glass that shimmered as if aware of every gaze upon it. She was to meet Dorian Vey for the first time in person, though they had exchanged only formal messages and briefing notes. Something in those sterile, professional words hinted at a mind as sharp as her own. The moment she entered the lobby, her senses prickled. Dorian stood by the central atrium, tall, impeccably dressed, and exuding a controlled magnetism that made even the most sophisticated AI assistants in the room seem deferential. His deep, brown eyes locked with hers, a flicker of amusement dancing across his expression. There was no mistaking it. He was aware of her presence, aware of her unusual red eyes, and aware of the subtle tension that now hummed in the air between them. "Miss Olsen," he said smoothly, his voice a precise mix of charm and command, "I've heard excellent things about your work." His smile was polite but measured, as though he were evaluating her potential as an ally or a threat. Ashley responded with a calm nod, masking the thrill racing through her. She had always been cautious, trained to read intentions and detect subtleties. Yet there was something intriguingly unpredictable about Dorian, something that made her pulse quicken despite her careful composure. The briefing began in a room lined with interactive holograms, projections of AI frameworks, and corporate schematics, rotating in 3 dimensions. Dorian guided the session with effortless authority, his fingers tracing patterns in the air that manipulated the data with almost artistic precision. Ashley contributed her own insights, her mind weaving through algorithms and anomalies, yet always aware of the subtle interplay between them, how every word, every glance carried weight. As the meeting concluded, Dorian lingered. "I hope this project proves as illuminating for you as it will be for me," he said, eyes locking once more with hers. The undertone was playful, perhaps even daring. Ashley felt a flicker of something, dangerous yet compelling. By the time she exited the building, Neo-Chicago's skyline had transformed under the brightening sun. Ashley walked along the skyways, her thoughts tangled with possibilities, strategies, and undeniable attraction. She knew instinctively that this encounter was only the beginning. Somewhere beneath Dorian's calculated demeanor, there were layers to uncover, and she intended to discover them all, carefully, cunningly, and entirely on her own terms. And as she disappeared into the pulsing city, Ashley realized that in a world of endless data and artificial precision, the most unpredictable variable was human desire, and she had just found hers in Dorian Vey. Neo-Chicago's evening lights flickered to life as Ashley returned to her apartment, the city below a lattice of luminescent highways and levitating transports. The hum of energy grids filled the air, vibrating subtly through the soles of her shoes, a constant reminder that she lived in a world powered by precision, technology, and untold secrets. Yet tonight, for the first time in years, her mind refused the usual clarity. It buzzed with questions, anticipation, and a dangerously thrilling uncertainty. Dorian Vey. The following morning brought a new assignment. Ashley was asked to conduct a security audit on a sector previously thought impenetrable, an area intertwined with Dorian's own corporate interests. She arrived at the gleaming facility, the polished floors reflecting the neon glow of her surroundings. Her heart thumped, not from fear, but from an undercurrent of awareness. Dorian was here, and the city itself seemed to hold its breath. He emerged from a side corridor as if conjured by her thoughts. His tailored suit, dark and understated, contrasted sharply with the vibrant city reflected in the glass walls. When his eyes met hers, there was a brief, almost imperceptible smile, the kind that spoke volumes but revealed nothing. Ashley caught herself analyzing every micro-expression, every tilt of his head. The line between professional and personal blurred in that moment. "Miss Olson," he said, voice smooth as flowing data streams, "I didn't expect to see you here so soon." "I always like to be early," she replied evenly, hiding the thrill that surged through her. She had mastered control, yet Dorian's presence chipped subtly at her careful composure. They walked together through the labyrinth of corridors, holographic security grids shimmering around them like ghostly constellations. Dorian's explanations were precise, his insight cutting through the complex systems with elegance. Ashley listened, but also observed. Every calculated movement, every word of his held layers she could not yet decipher. There was trust, yes, but also something else, a challenge, a subtle game being played, and she was unwillingly drawn in. As the audit progressed, their collaboration sparked subtle tension. When she suggested an optimization, Dorian's eyes lingered on hers longer than necessary. When he countered her idea, it was not with arrogance, but with a challenge that teased her intellect and stoked the thrill of rivalry. Their banter became a delicate dance, clever, charged, and unmistakably personal. By the time the audit concluded, Ashley's mind was spinning. The corridors were silent now, save for the distant hum of machinery, and yet the room felt thick with unspoken words and hidden intentions. Dorian leaned casually against the wall, eyes tracking hers, a quiet smirk tugging at his lips. "You're sharper than I expected," he said softly, almost as a confession, "and far more interesting than the usual analysts." Ashley felt a heat rise to her cheeks, partly embarrassment, partly exhilaration. She knew she was being drawn into something far beyond routine audits and corporate oversight, into a web of intrigue, desire, and unspoken power. And as she left the facility, the neon glow of Neo-Chicago reflecting in her eyes, Ashley understood a truth she could no longer ignore. The most dangerous games were not played with technology or power alone, but with hearts, ambitions, and the fragile lines between them. Tonight, the city hummed with possibilities, and for the first time, Ashley welcomed the uncertainty. The neon glow of Neo-Chicago bled through Ashley's apartment windows, painting her room in electric purples and cobalt blues. Despite the city's brilliance, an uneasy stillness settled over her. The events of the past days, the subtle glances, the charged words, the invisible game of intellect and will with Dorian, had awakened something in her. She was no longer just an analyst. She was a player in a deeper, more dangerous field. Her thoughts were interrupted by a discreet alert from her wrist console, an encrypted message from a source she didn't immediately recognize. The message was short, almost cryptic. "Trust is the currency of the blind. Meet me at the Nexus Hub. Midnight." Ashley felt a flicker of intrigue and caution. Nexus Hub was a public but highly controlled transit center, a crossroads for the city's elite, corporate agents, and shadow operatives. Whoever sent this message knew she was intelligent, careful, and highly observant. Whoever it was, they wanted something. As midnight approached, she slipped into her sleek, adaptive suit, black with subtle iridescent threads that reflected the city's neon in subdued flashes. Her red eyes scanned the streets as she descended into the Nexus Hub, blending effortlessly into the crowd while maintaining a quiet vigilance. The hub was alive with movement, levitating pods arriving and departing, holographic advertisements flickering above heads, and murmurs of deals, secrets, and whispered alliances. She spotted her contact immediately, a tall figure in a hooded coat, face obscured. Their posture radiated confidence, but the slight twitch in their hand suggested a hidden tension. "Ashley Olsen," the figure said, voice modulated, almost metallic. "I have information that could change everything about Dorian Vey." Her pulse quickened. Dorian? She had been cautious, but she couldn't ignore the risk. "Go on," she said, voice steady, heart racing. "The audit you conducted, it wasn't just about AI security. There's a larger operation in play, a network of rival corporations, private enforcers, and hidden AI regulators. Dorian is at the center, but he's not the only player. You've been marked as influential." Ashley's mind raced. Influential? Marked? Every interaction, every glance, every seemingly casual remark from Dorian now took on a new dimension. Was he a threat? An ally? Or something more dangerous? Someone who was playing a game she didn't yet understand. Before she could ask more, the figure handed her a tiny data shard, its surface glowing faintly. "Study this. You'll know what to do next. But be careful. Trust no one completely, not even him." The figure melted into the crowd, leaving Ashley alone amidst the hum of the Nexus Hub. She examined the shard, a swirl of encrypted codes and layered information flashing across its surface. Each file revealed connections, hidden partnerships, and corporate intrigue that stretched far beyond her previous understanding. She realized with a jolt. Dorian's world and her own, was infinitely more complex and perilous than she had imagined. The city outside pulsed with life, indifferent to the silent storm brewing within its towers. Ashley's red eyes reflected the neon lights as she made a decision. She would navigate this dangerous maze of intrigue, uncover the hidden truths, and determine whether Dorian Vey was her ally, her adversary, or something far more unpredictable. And somewhere in the shadows of Neo-Chicago, her presence had already been noted. Someone was watching, waiting, and the game had only just begun. The neon skyline of Neo-Chicago stretched endlessly before Ashley, a city alive with technology, ambition, and secrets. Every window, every glimmering tower seemed to pulse with potential danger, every shadow a possible threat. She had spent the day analyzing the data shard, each file revealing intricate connections between Dorian Vey's operations and a network of clandestine organizations. The deeper she delved, the more she realized that her world, once orderly and predictable, had transformed into a labyrinth of hidden motives. By nightfall, Ashley found herself on the observation deck of a high-rise corporate complex, one of the very locations detailed in the shard. From this height, she could see the pulse of the city, levitating transports weaving between towers like streams of liquid light, holographic ads dancing across the sky, and the shadowed alleys where secrets whispered in every corner. This vantage point was ideal for planning her next move, but it also made her painfully aware of how vulnerable she truly was. A soft vibration from her wrist console drew her attention. Another encrypted message. "Meet me. No intermediaries. Midnight. Skybridge 9. The sender remained anonymous, but the urgency was clear. Ashley's instincts told her this was more than a casual warning. It was an opportunity. Midnight arrived. She slipped into her adaptive suit, its dark iridescence blending with the city lights. On Skybridge 9, the air shimmered with levitated energy currents and the hum of airborne transports. She spotted him before he could see her. Dorian Vey, casually leaning against the bridge's railing, his dark suit absorbing the city's glow. His eyes met hers with a mixture of amusement and calculation. "Miss Olson," he said smoothly, his voice carrying over the humming currents, "I wondered how long it would take for you to find your way here." Ashley's pulse quickened, but she maintained her composure. "I could ask the same of you. You're always 3 steps ahead." Dorian's smirk widened. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I simply know the game better than most." He extended a hand, not in greeting, but as an invitation. "Come closer, and I'll show you something you didn't expect." She approached cautiously, aware that every step was a potential risk. Dorian activated a small holoprojector from his wrist, and a 3-dimensional map of Neo-Chicago unfolded between them. Red markers indicated high-security zones, while flickering blue nodes represented hidden operations, many of which were previously unknown. "I didn't want you to stumble blindly," Dorian explained, "but now that you know some of the truths, you have to choose your alliances wisely. Not everyone you trust is on your side." Ashley studied the map, her mind racing. "And you? Where do you stand in all this?" Dorian's gaze sharpened. "I stand where I must, and I move where the balance shifts. But don't mistake my guidance for loyalty." A sudden alert on Ashley's wrist shattered the tension, an intrusion detected in one of the key nodes highlighted on the map. Without hesitation, Dorian grabbed her hand and led her to the edge of the bridge, activating a rapid descent harness. They plunged through the city's luminescent skyline, dodging air patrols and security drones with precision. Each maneuver was a test of trust and reflex, a silent challenge that entwined their fates further. By the time they landed in a hidden sector below, Ashley's mind was a storm of questions, doubts, and undeniable intrigue. Dorian Vey had shown her both danger and possibility, and she knew that the path ahead would demand wit, courage, and an almost reckless cunning. As the city's neon glow faded behind them, Ashley realized one undeniable truth. The game had escalated, and the stakes were no longer just corporate secrets. They were lives, loyalty, and the fragile threads of trust that bound her to Dorian. Tonight, Neo-Chicago had witnessed the beginning of a tangled alliance, one built on risk, intellect, and the unspoken tension of two formidable players drawn inexorably together. The underground sector of Neo-Chicago smelled of ozone and metallic residue from the city's constant hum of energy flows. Ashley's adaptive suit glimmered faintly under the dim, ambient lights, reflecting the faint traces of neon that seeped in from the upper levels. The descent with Dorian had been breathtaking, but it had also drawn attention. Somewhere above, the city's enforcers and private operatives were already scanning for anomalies. Dorian led Ashley through a labyrinth of narrow corridors, walls, lined with pulsating conduits that transmitted energy across the sector. He moved with practiced ease, a predator in his own territory, while Ashley kept her senses razor-sharp, cataloging every flicker of movement, every whisper of sound. Her wrist console buzzed intermittently, signals she couldn't immediately trace. Someone was following them, but who? Friend, foe, or both? Finally, they entered a spacious chamber filled with holographic projections of Neo-Chicago and its surrounding zones. Each projection highlighted strategic points, weak links in security grids and locations of clandestine operations. Ashley's mind raced, absorbing every detail. This is beyond anything I've encountered, she murmured. Dorian's dark eyes studied her reaction. The shard was only the beginning. What you saw there was a fraction of the truth. There are factions within factions, alliances hidden beneath alliances, and everyone wants something from you, directly or indirectly. Before Ashley could respond, a sudden alarm echoed through the chamber. A red pulse traveling across the projections. "They've breached the perimeter," Dorian said, his voice taut with urgency. "We've got company." Ashley felt her pulse quicken. She didn't need to be told twice. They moved to a side corridor, only to be confronted by three shadow agents emerging from the darkness. Their visors glowed faintly, and their weapons hummed with energy. "Stay close," Dorian whispered, and in the next instant, chaos erupted. Ashley activated her suit's kinetic dampeners and launched herself with precision, using the walls and conduits to swing and evade. Sparks flew as energy blasts ricocheted off the metal surfaces. She realized, even in this brief but intense encounter, that Dorian's reputation was well earned. His movements were seamless, almost choreographed, and yet unpredictably lethal. One agent lunged at Ashley with a pulse blade, but she sidestepped, using a conduit to catapult herself into a spin that disarmed him. Another tried to flank Dorian, but a swift strike and a calculated energy pulse incapacitated him. The final agent, more agile and cunning, pressed the attack. Ashley's mind raced, and instinctively she activated a cloaking field around herself, vanishing from sight and confusing her opponent. When the fight ended, both Ashley and Dorian were panting, adrenaline coursing through their veins. "Impressive," Dorian said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "You're faster than I anticipated." Ashley gave a small, wry smile. "I had a good teacher." For a brief moment, amidst the flickering lights and distant hum of energy, a connection passed between them. Trust forged in battle, a shared acknowledgement of skill and resilience. But the danger wasn't over. The breach had been a warning, a signal that others were watching, that the game had intensified, and that Neo-Chicago was a web of shadows in which no one was truly safe. As they disappeared further into the labyrinth, Ashley's mind was alive with calculations, strategies, and possibilities. She understood now. The intrigue was only beginning, and every step forward would demand courage, wit, and the ability to anticipate both friend and foe. In this game of shadows, one misstep could cost everything, and yet she felt a surge of exhilaration. This was where she truly belonged. The city above pulsed with indifferent brilliance, but below, in the heart of the shadows, a silent war had begun, and Ashley Olsen was at its center. Ashley's mind was a whirlwind as they navigated the underground labyrinth. The skirmish with the shadow agents had left her senses sharpened, her instincts alert to the faintest anomaly. Neo-Chicago's neon glow bled faintly into the corridors, casting jagged reflections on the metal walls and making every shadow seem alive. She felt the city's pulse through the conduits, a rhythm of energy, movement, and subtle menace. Dorian moved ahead with his usual precision, scanning every corridor, reading the faint electromagnetic signals, and avoiding any residual traps. Ashley admired his skill but kept her thoughts private. Trust in this world was a currency far more precious than money, and just as volatile. Their destination was a hidden data hub, a place where Dorian claimed they could uncover the architects behind the shadow attacks. Yet something in the air felt wrong. Too silent, too orchestrated. Ashley's instincts flared. She signaled. Dorian with a subtle hand motion, and he slowed, scanning the area. "Something's off," Ashley whispered. Dorian's dark eyes narrowed. "I felt it too. Keep your guard up." They entered the hub, a cavernous room filled with servers and holographic panels. Data streams flowed like liquid light, illuminating the metallic expanse. As they approached the central console, Ashley noticed a subtle movement in the reflections, a figure lingering behind a pillar just beyond the projection glow. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steady but sharp. The figure didn't respond. Before anyone could react, the lights in the hub flickered and went out completely. Ashley's adaptive suit hummed softly, its sensors activating to compensate for the darkness. And then, a pulse of energy hit the floor, a trap designed to incapacitate intruders. Dorian barely reacted in time, his energy shield flaring up to absorb the shock. Ashley stumbled but caught herself, heart pounding. The figure stepped forward, revealing a familiar face. "Ashley," a smooth voice purred, cold and calculating. "I was wondering when you'd come crawling here." It was Marlowe Kine, a former ally she had trusted, someone she had believed to be working for her. But now, in the harsh neon shadows, the betrayal was evident. His eyes glimmered with amusement, and his weapon glowed with lethal energy. "You?" Ashley breathed, her voice a mixture of disbelief and fury. "I told you, trust is a fragile thing," Marlowe replied, stepping closer, "especially in a city like Neo-Chicago." Dorian positioned himself between Ashley and Marlowe, a wall of controlled menace. "Stay back," he warned. "This isn't your fight anymore." Ashley's mind raced. Every angle, every potential escape route, every tactic she had learned over months of espionage and survival surged to the forefront. "Dorian," she hissed, "we can't fight him head-on. He knows these corridors." Dorian's jaw tightened. "Then we make him fight on our terms." Using the hub's environment to their advantage, Ashley triggered a series of electromagnetic pulses, disrupting Marlowe's weapon systems temporarily. Sparks flew, lights danced across the walls, and the room became a chaotic interplay of shadows and motion. Ashley moved with agility, her suit amplifying her speed and reflexes. Marlowe lunged, but Ashley sidestepped, planting a strategically timed pulse charge that sent him staggering back. "You underestimated me," she said, her voice calm but edged with authority. Dorian advanced simultaneously, his strikes precise and fluid, forcing Marlowe to retreat further into the shadows. For a brief, tense moment, the three figures moved. Like pieces in a deadly chess game, Ashley calculating, Dorian executing, and Marlowe adapting. Finally, Marlowe vanished into a hidden passage, leaving a warning behind. "You've only seen the first act, Ashley. The city is deeper, darker, and more dangerous than you realize." Ashley and Dorian stood in the center of the dimly lit hub, adrenaline fading to a simmering heat. Ashley's green eyes scanned the room, her mind already piecing together the implications. A trusted ally had turned traitor, The city's hidden factions were far more interconnected than she had imagined, and the line between friend and enemy had blurred dangerously. Dorian's hand rested briefly on her shoulder. We adapt or we die. There's no other option in Neo-Chicago. Ashley nodded, a mix of determination and fire lighting her expression. Betrayal had a sting, but it also sharpened her resolve. Every secret, every alliance, every calculated move from this point forward would shape her survival and her dominance in a city where the shadows ruled and trust was a weapon just as lethal as any pulse blade. The game had grown darker, and Ashley Olsen had only just begun to play. Ashley moved silently through the narrow maintenance shafts beneath Neo-Chicago, her suit blending seamlessly with the dim luminescence of the conduit-lit walls. Every step was measured, each breath controlled, as though the shadows themselves were testing her presence. Dorian followed closely, his presence both reassuring and electrifying. The tension between them simmering quietly beneath the professional facade. "The city's pulse is shifting," Dorian murmured, scanning the faint holographic displays projected on the walls. Marlowe's betrayal wasn't random. He's part of something larger, something embedded in every layer of Neo-Chicago. Ashley's green eyes narrowed. She could feel the implications, factions hidden in plain sight, alliances forged in secrecy, and enemies cloaked beneath facades of legitimacy. She adjusted the wrist console on her suit, feeding the data streams into her cognitive interface, trying to detect any trace of Marlowe's next move. Their first stop was a hidden safe house nestled in the lower sectors, a relic from Dorian's past operations. The room was sparse. Metal walls, a single energy core humming quietly, and a projection table in the center displaying a holographic grid of Neo-Chicago's sprawling undercity. Ashley studied the grid, her mind racing. If Marlowe's working, with a faction embedded in the upper zones, she said, he has eyes everywhere. We need allies, but trust, we have to be careful. Before Dorian could respond, the doorway slid open silently. A figure stepped inside, a woman with platinum hair, her suit marked with subtle insignias of an underground faction known only as the Luminous Hand. Her expression was calm, calculating, yet her gaze lingered on Ashley with something close. To admiration. "You must be Ashley Olsen," the woman said, her voice smooth but firm. "I've heard of your exploits." Ashley's eyes flicked to Dorian. "And you are?" "Call me Seraph," the woman replied. "I've been tracking Marlowe. He's not just a traitor, he's a messenger. He works for a council that wants control of Neo-Chicago's core energy nodes, and you, Ashley, are in their way." Ashley absorbed the words, each syllable sharpening the edges of her mind. "And why help me?" she asked, her voice laced with skepticism. "You're not exactly aligned with the city's authorities." Seraph smiled faintly. "We have our interests, yes. But survival often demands temporary alliances. You've survived more than anyone else, and your methods, they're effective. We need someone who can operate where others fear to tread." Dorian's lips tightened. "And in exchange, what do you expect?" "Information," Seraph replied. "Access to networks, locations, and data that are hidden from public view. In return, we guide you to the Council's nodes before Marlowe can fully exploit them." Ashley paused, weighing the offer. Every instinct screamed caution, yet every part of her craved the challenge. Neo-Chicago was a chessboard, and she was beginning to understand that alliances were as vital as any weapon. "All right," she said finally. "We move together, but one misstep, and it's over." Seraph inclined her head. Agreed. As the three moved deeper into the city's underground veins, Ashley felt a mix of anticipation and apprehension. The air grew colder, tinged with the faint metallic tang of energy cores, the hum of the city above reverberating through the corridors. Each turn, each junction, could conceal a trap, a spy, or a hidden faction waiting to test them. Dorian's Hand brushed against Ashley's as they navigated a particularly tight shaft. A spark of unspoken connection passed between them, a tension that neither addressed, but both felt. It was a reminder that in this city of shadows, the heart could be both a liability and a weapon. Suddenly, the corridor widened into a cavernous chamber, dominated by a massive central node, a glowing core of pulsating energy, veins of light extending outward like a neural network. Ashley's eyes widened. This was the Council's node, one of the critical junctions Marlowe had targeted. "We're close," Seraph said, her voice low. "But this is where it gets dangerous. The Council guards these nodes zealously. They'll know we're here the instant we breach the perimeter." Ashley's pulse quickened. This was more than espionage. It was a test of intellect, agility, and nerve. Every shadow could conceal an enemy. Every reflection could betray. A movement, and every second counted. She glanced at Dorian. "Ready?" He met her gaze, a faint, wry smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Always." And with that they stepped into the chamber, the glow of the central node casting long, shifting shadows. Here, in the heart of Neo-Chicago's hidden machinery, alliances would be tested, loyalties questioned, and the first real move against the Council would unfold. Ashley Olsen inhaled sharply, her eyes shining with determination. The game was no longer survival. It was domination, strategy, and the beginning of a war fought in shadows. The chamber was nothing like Peter imagined. For days he had braced himself for some cold vault of alien machinery filled with humming devices and incomprehensible constructs. But when the great circular doors finally groaned open, what awaited? Him, instead, was a cathedral of silence, the walls arched high above his head, polished like obsidian glass, yet alive with faint movements. Shadows shifted within the stone itself, as though the walls were not solid, but rather deep pools of liquid night. Each step Peter took echoed impossibly loud, the sound bouncing and fracturing until it became a chorus, his footsteps arriving. Back to him from every direction, delayed and distorted. It was not a room, he realized, but a resonator. "Careful," Saren's voice whispered over comms. Even she, usually so composed, sounded unnerved. "This place is designed to... remember?" Peter frowned. "Remember what?" But his words never reached her. The chamber answered instead. 1,000 voices erupted from the walls at once. Human. Voices, male, female, old, young. Some laughed, others screamed, some prayed, some cursed. And beneath them all, rising like a tide, came a tone so low it made Peter's teeth ache. He froze, heart pounding. These weren't just echoes. They were imprints, memories, fragments of lives that had somehow been absorbed. The chamber was alive with ghosts. Then one voice broke free from the chaos. Clear, familiar. Peter. His breath caught in his throat. It wasn't possible. But the voice, low, steady, lined with warmth, was his father's. He spun, searching the chamber, but there was nothing but the shifting walls. The voice came again, closer this time, weaving through the fractured echoes. "You don't belong here, son. None of us do." His knees weakened. His father had been dead for years, buried in the last wave of Earth's collapse. And yet here he was, his voice alive in this alien place, threading into Peter's bones like it had never left. He shut his eyes. It's a trick. He forced the thought, but it rang hollow. Saren's voice cut in faintly, distorted. "Peter, don't listen. The chamber reads you. It pulls memories, makes them real." Her warning came too late. The walls rippled, and then, impossibly, a figure stepped forward from the obsidian itself. It was his father, or at least the shape of him. Tall, broad-shouldered, eyes that had always seemed to hold unshakable certainty. Except now they glowed faintly with threads of silver light, as though the chamber itself had animated him from within. Peter's breath hitched. "Dad." The figure smiled, soft, knowing. "You've carried the weight of Earth too long, son. You think saving its signal will save us, but Earth is already gone." The words landed like blows. Peter wanted to argue, to shout, but something deeper in him stirred. Doubt, the kind he had buried beneath orders, missions, survival. What if it was true? What if chasing this last signal was nothing more than clinging? "To ashes?" The figure stepped closer, the air humming with resonance. "Let it go, Peter. Stay here. Rest. The echoes will keep you." For a moment he almost believed it. The exhaustion of years, the endless fight to carry humanity's memory forward. He wanted it to end, to finally lay it down. But then another sound rose from the walls. A new voice, softer, fragile. "Peter, don't stop." His chest tightened. His sister's voice, Marina. She had died during the first refugee crossings, swallowed by the collapse of the Atlantic Arc. He remembered holding her hand as the fires spread, promising her that he'd keep moving, no matter what. Her voice repeated, threading through the chamber's false comfort. "Don't stop. Don't stop." The figure of his father froze, the silver in its eyes flickering. The chamber itself shuddered, the walls rippling violently as if fighting to decide which memory to hold. Peter's fists clenched. His father's face looked so real, so achingly close, but his sister's words were sharper, cutting through the fog of doubt. He stepped forward, glaring at the apparition. "You're not him." The figure tilted its head, silver eyes burning. "And yet, you want me to be." "I don't want lies," Peter growled, voice low but steady. "I want the truth. And the truth is, Earth isn't gone, not if its memory still lives." With those words, the apparition cracked. Silver light split through it like a mirror shattering. The chamber wailed, every voice rising in a deafening roar. Peter stumbled back, covering his ears. Saren's voice cut through the chaos again, urgent now. "Peter, you've broken its hold. Move, now!" He forced his legs to obey, sprinting toward the chamber's far end where a circular platform pulsed faintly with light. Behind him, the walls buckled and split, screaming with thousands of fractured voices. As he reached the platform, the chamber's noise suddenly collapsed into silence. The obsidian walls froze once more, black and still, as if nothing had ever stirred within them. Peter fell to his knees, gasping. He knew now what the chamber was, not a vault of machines, but a prison of memory. A place designed to test the will of those who entered, to devour the weak and bind them to its endless echoes, and he had barely escaped. But as he stood, one thought burned sharper than ever. The signal was real. His sister's voice, her reminder, proved it. No matter how deep the echoes, he would not stop, not until Earth's last signal was found. The chamber hummed with a low vibration, as though the walls themselves were straining to hold back some ancient force. Peter stood before the console, the pale blue light from the cracked holographic display, painting his face in spectral tones. The signal, the one he had chased across void and silence, was no longer a whisper and static. It was alive, pulsing in erratic bursts, like a heart struggling to beat after centuries of dormancy. "Peter!" Lessera's voice cut through the silence, steady but touched by an unease she could not mask. "This frequency, it's not just a broadcast, it's reacting to you." He stared at the wavering symbols that scrolled across the console. They were not human letters, not even alien glyphs he could assign meaning to. Instead, they shifted, bending into shapes that seemed to mirror his own memories, fragments of Earth, flickers of faces long gone, oceans and forests devoured by time. "How?" Peter whispered, reaching toward the light. His fingers hovered above the projection, and as he moved, the symbols bent in tandem, like water rippling beneath the brush of a hand. The chamber darkened. A surge of power flowed through the walls, cracking the floor tiles underfoot. The signal flared so brightly that everyone shielded their eyes. And then it spoke, not in sound, but in thought. A deep resonance flooded Peter's mind, threading into his veins like molten iron. He staggered, clutching his head. but the voice pressed on, not alien, not entirely human, but something caught between. "You are late." His breath caught. Late? His heart pounded as he tried to push back against the presence clawing through his consciousness. "Who are you?" The silence stretched, but the answer came like a storm breaking. "The last keeper. The one who remembers when Earth still breathed. We are fragments. You are the vessel." The words shattered his defenses. For an instant he was not in the chamber, but on Earth itself, standing on a shoreline of black sand, waves rolling in under a sky fractured by fire. Cities burned in the distance. Shadows moved across the ruins, and above them loomed a figure cloaked in light so bright it hurt to look upon. Peter gasped, stumbling backward. Lysara caught him before he fell, her eyes scanning the pulsing glyphs. "Oh, what did it say?" They called me a vessel." His voice shook with equal parts fear and awe. "A keeper of memories." Before anyone could respond, the console flared again. The signal split into dozens of streams, each one racing across the chamber walls, crawling like veins of light. The ground quaked as if the planet itself was awakening. Kalen cursed Underi, his breath tightening his grip on his weapon. "We've triggered something. This isn't a signal. It's a lock." And as if summoned by his words, the chamber's far wall fractured, stones splitting apart to reveal a black corridor that stretched endlessly downward. A gust of air spilled out, bitterly cold, carrying the faint sound of voices, thousands of whispers layered together in endless echoes. The crew exchanged tense glances. None of them wanted to step forward. Yet the signal pulled at Peter with the inexorable weight of destiny. "We have to follow it," Peter said, his tone steady now despite the fear knotting his stomach. "Whatever this is, it's tied to me, to Earth." Lysara's gaze lingered on him, searching, before she finally nodded. "Then we go together." They descended. The corridor narrowed, its walls lined with crystalline shards that pulsed in rhythm with Peter's heartbeat. At times the whispers grew clear, and Peter swore he heard his name spoken in voices he remembered, his father, his sister, friends he had lost in the collapse of Earth. Each echo struck like a blade twisting in his chest. Finally, they emerged into a cavern so vast it seemed to stretch forever. At its center stood a monolith, colossal, obsidian black, etched with the same living symbols that had spoken to him. The top was shattered, jagged edges glowing faintly red, as if from within. And then Peter understood. The monolith wasn't broadcasting a signal. It was bleeding one, a wound torn open in time, leaking fragments of what Earth once was. The last Earth signal wasn't just a call. It was the memory of a world dying, preserved in fractured shards. But as he stepped closer, another realization settled like lead in his stomach. The signal was no longer contained, and someone, or something, was listening on the other end. The monolith trembled, the air filled with a low guttural hum building into a roar that reverberated through their bones. Cracks spidered across the chamber floor. From deep within the monolith's wound, a shape began to move, not human, not alien, something in between. The whispers rose into a deafening crescendo, and Peter felt his knees buckle as the truth struck him. The last Earth signal hadn't just been found, it had awakened. The chamber was unlike anything Peter had seen. It wasn't just stone and metal, it felt alive. Pulsing streams of faint blue light ran across the walls like veins beneath translucent skin. Each step echoed softly, as though the chamber absorbed sound instead of amplifying it. At the center stood the artifact, a monolith, not large but impossibly dense, a dark obelisk no taller than Peter himself. Symbols writhed across its surface, rearranging themselves in patterns that never repeated. It thrummed faintly, as though aware of his presence. "Careful," Mira whispered, her eyes wide. "It feels like it's listening." Peter approached, his breath shallow. He didn't need anyone to tell him this was no ordinary relic. Something in the air bent around it, tugging at his chest like an invisible tide. His instincts screamed both danger and destiny. He reached out, but before his hand touched the surface, the monolith pulsed once, releasing a wave of resonance that shivered through the room. The lights along the walls flared, and suddenly Peter was no longer in the chamber. He stood on scorched earth under a blackened sky. Towers of glass and steel lay in ruins around him. Fires burned in the distance. A city, no, Earth. He recognized the skyline, though it was twisted and broken, swallowed by shadows. Above, massive shapes drifted. Through the clouds, alien warships, their silhouettes like knives cutting the heavens apart. And then came the voices, not singular, collective, thousands layered over one another like a storm made of words. You are the remnant, the signal-bearer. The fracture must be mended or all fall silent. The vision flickered. Peter gasped, falling to his knees. Sweat dripped down his face as the chamber returned around him. His heart pounded like a war drum. "Peter!" Mira rushed forward, gripping his shoulders. "What happened?" He stared at her, still trembling. "Earth! It's burning, I saw it. The artifact, it's not just some relic, it's a beacon." "Beacon?" Solace stepped closer, suspicion in his eyes. Peter swallowed. "It's sending... No. It's receiving. The last signal from Earth." The others froze. Even hardened soldiers went pale at those words. Home. Mythical, distant, thought to be unreachable. For generations, Earth had been a memory fading into legend. Its final transmissions cut off centuries ago. Yet here was proof, living, resonant proof, that something of it still echoed across the stars. But before anyone could speak, the monolith pulsed again. This time, the light wasn't faint. It blazed. Lines of power shot across the floor, converging on Peter. His chest burned, the shard embedded within him, that strange fragment he had carried since Andorus 9, reacted violently. The artifact and the shard were connected. Peter cried out, clutching his chest, as the two forces resonated in sync. For a heartbeat, he felt his mind split, half tethered to the chamber, half hurled into the void between stars. He saw fragments, human fleets lost in the dark alien hands building impossible machines, a vast veil of energy stretching across space, hiding something colossal. And then, as abruptly as it began, the resonance ceased. Peter collapsed, gasping for air. When he raised his head, his companions looked at him not with suspicion, but with something heavier. Awe, fear, expectation. Solace broke the silence first. "Whatever this is, you're bound to it. That shard, that artifact, it's no coincidence. You are the link." Peter shook his head, still shaking. "I didn't choose this." "Maybe not," Mira said softly, her eyes glimmering. "But it chose you." The chamber grew silent again. Only the faint hum of the monolith remained, like a heart waiting for its pulse to be answered. And deep down, Peter knew one thing with bone-deep certainty. This was only the beginning. The last Earth signal wasn't just a fragment of history. It was a call to action. The ship hung in the void, a fragile shard of steel drifting against the immensity of the stars. For the first time in days, the engines were silent. The hum that had become as steady as a heartbeat was gone, and with it came an unnerving stillness. To some it felt like peace, like the eye of a storm. To Peter, it felt like the moment before a final judgment. He stood alone on the bridge, hands braced on the console, watching the fractured planet they had left behind fade into the endless distance. Its shattered silhouette was barely visible now, but he could still trace the jagged cracks and molten scars in memory. Earth, home, was no longer a world. It was a grave. The others slept in rotations, exhaustion carving lines into their faces, their bodies succumbing to fatigue even when their minds resisted. Sarah had collapsed from near total depletion after rerouting the auxiliary drives through a damaged conduit. John Varn, his arms still bound from the last battle, had stationed himself near the barracks, keeping guard even in rest. Each carried scars from the voyage, physical, emotional, spiritual. Peter had no luxury for rest, not tonight. His eyes stayed locked on the navigation charts flickering before him. Their course was plotted toward the coordinates left behind. In the fragments of the last Earth signal, the faint pulse that had survived annihilation, a message buried under collapsing data strings, decoded at great cost, a beacon or a trap. "Captain?" The voice was faint, hesitant. He turned to see Sarah standing in the doorway, pale but upright. Her green eyes gleamed in the dim glow of the consoles, carrying a sharpness that belied her exhaustion. "You should be resting," Peter said softly, though there was no rebuke in his tone. "I tried," she admitted, moving closer. "But sleep doesn't come easy when silence weighs like this. It feels as if the universe itself is holding its breath." Peter gave a dry laugh, low and bitter. "Maybe it is. Maybe we've gone too far, past the point where even the stars dares to interfere." Sarah studied him carefully. "You're afraid." He didn't deny it. The honesty between them had grown in the fires of catastrophe. There was no space left for posturing. "Yes, afraid that the signal is nothing but an echo. Afraid that we're chasing ghosts while what remains of humanity dwindles inside this ship. Afraid that if we reach the end and there's nothing there, then we keep going," she interrupted firmly, "because that's what survivors do." Her words struck something inside him, a reminder of the very resolve that had kept them alive through the chaos of Earth's final hours. He had not asked to be a leader, yet every eye turned to him, every decision bore the weight of lives. And now, with the faint signal drawing them deeper into uncharted darkness, he felt the crushing gravity of every choice. A sudden alarm cut through the silence. The navigation display flared red, highlighting distortions ahead. A ripple in space, subtle but unmistakable. John stumbled onto the bridge, woken by the sound, his face taut with suspicion. "What is it?" he demanded. Sarah adjusted the scans. "Not debris, not a natural anomaly either. It's structured, controlled." Peter's throat tightened. "Then the signal. It isn't just an echo. Something or someone is waiting for us." The three stood in silence, the enormity of the revelation pressing down on them, hope and dread, tangled in equal measure. If the signal was real, it meant survival, a chance that humanity had not truly perished. But if it was a trap, then they were sailing willingly into the jaws of annihilation. Peter's gaze lingered on the viewport, the distortion ahead, rippling, like a wound in space. For the first time since Earth's destruction, he felt the enormity of the silence truly settle over him. The silence of a world gone, the silence of unanswered prayers, the silence before the first word of a new fate. He straightened, shoulders heavy yet unyielding. "Set course through," he ordered, voice steady. "We follow the signal. Whatever waits for us on the other side, we face it." The engines stirred to life once more, their hum breaking the oppressive quiet. The distortion loomed larger, swelling until it consumed the stars. And as the ship slipped into its trembling maw, Peter whispered, not to his crew, not to himself, but to the memory of a broken Earth, "Let this not be the end." The chamber was a cathedral of silence. Peter's boots struck the polished black stone with a sound that seemed swallowed the moment it echoed. Every surface shimmered with faint blue light, pulsing in tandem with the glyphs etched into the towering walls. It felt less like architecture and more like a machine, alive, humming, waiting. At the center stood the obelisk, a colossal pillar of crystalline material, translucent yet impossibly dense. Its surface rippled as though it contained an ocean of stars. Peter felt its pull, not just on his body, but on his very thoughts. The closer he came, the louder the mohet hum inside his head became, not sound exactly, but a presence whispering in forgotten tongues. "Be careful," Sarah's voice cut through, sharp but unsteady. Her hand brushed the grip of her sidearm, though she seemed to know a weapon here was useless. John flanked Peter, eyes darting across the chamber like a soldier watching for snipers. Though even he could not disguise the awe tightening his jaw. Peter slowed his step, raising a hand toward the obelisk. Heat bled through the air, prickling his skin. The moment his palm touched the surface, the universe split open. The glyphs blazed like wildfire. The chamber trembled, and a low resonance thundered through the floor as if the planet itself were groaning awake. Images exploded into Peter's mind, not memories, not visions, but fragments of an intelligence so vast it nearly crushed him. He saw Earth, oceans draining, cities crumbling, skies blackened. He saw fleets of unknown vessels crossing voids between galaxies. He saw titans of flesh and metal tearing worlds apart. But then he saw them, humans, surviving, hidden, scattered. Colonies carrying fragments of what they once were. And at the center of it all, something that looked like him, but older, eyes burning with the same light as the obelisk. Peter staggered, clutching his head. John caught him before he collapsed, his voice harsh but laced with fear. "What did you see?" Peter gasped, the words trembling from his throat. They knew we were coming. This was never just a refuge. "It's a signal, a call." As if answering him, the obelisk surged. A column of light shot upward, piercing the roof of the chamber, lancing through the heavens. The planet shuddered like a heartbeat. Outside, the storm clouds split open, and arcs of energy carved across the sky. Sarah's eyes widened. "We've just lit a beacon." A chilling realization settled in all three of them. This wasn't the end of their search, it was the beginning. They hadn't found safety. They had awakened something vast, something waiting in the dark between stars. Peter stared into the still rippling core of the obelisk, his reflection fractured into 1,000 shards. His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of everything he had seen. They're coming. The silence that fell over the bridge of the Vanguard's oath was the kind that pressed into bone. Every screen, every readout, every flickering sensor pulse showed the same impossible truth. The veil was breaking. Outside the reinforced viewport, a gash of raw light widened across the black canvas of space. It wasn't a star, not a nova, not any natural phenomenon. It was the unraveling of the cosmic barrier that had, for millennia, separated human space from the depths of the forbidden beyond. Caven Rowe stood at the helm, his hands gripping the rail so tightly his knuckles were white. For all his strength and composure, there was a moment, just a flicker, where his mask of command slipped. He was not watching a battlefield unfold. He was watching a truth that should never have been revealed. The crew felt it too. A low hum reverberated through the decks, almost alive, as if the breach itself had a pulse. The artificial gravity swayed. Lights dimmed, and shadows seemed to stretch longer than they should. "They're not coming through," whispered Vela, her voice barely audible over the hum. "They've always been here. The veil wasn't keeping them out, it was keeping them in." Her words spread like fire through the bridge, whispered from officer to officer. And then the breach widened again, reality peeling back like skin. Out of the rift came something vast, not a ship, not a fleet, but a presence. Its form flickered between architecture and anatomy. Colossal structures that could have been bone or machinery, eyes that seemed to exist only when you looked directly at them. Every sensor tried to measure it, catalog it, define it, and failed. "Readings are... they're folding back on themselves," stammered Arvin, his voice shaking. "It's not space they're moving through, it's us. They're already inside every system, every thought, every—" "Stop!" Caven barked, his voice sharp enough to snap the spell. He turned to his officers, his jaw set like iron. "Don't give them more than they already have. Fear is their foothold. Hold your ground." But even as he said it, he felt the edges of his mind strain. Memories flickered. His father's face, his training days, moments of failure and triumph, spooling in rapid succession, as if something unseen was rifling through his past. He staggered, clutching the console. Threxelay's voice came then, not aloud, but inside every skull aboard the ship. a voice of layered tones, ancient and infinite, carrying the weight of something that had watched empires rise and crumble. The veil was not your shield, Caven Row. It was your leash, and now it is gone. The bridge quaked. Sparks rained from overhead conduits. The great form beyond the viewport pulsed once, and hundreds of ships in the human fleet winked out like dying embers. No explosion, no wreckage, just absence, as if they had been erased from existence. Caven forced himself to rise, his voice carrying above the chaos. All ships, form defensive wings. Do not give them open ground. But in the pit of his chest, he knew this was not a battle of ships or weapons. This was a war of wills, of identity itself. And already the veil's unraveling had begun to eat away at who they were. Vela staggered to his side, clutching. Her head, her eyes, glassy. They're rewriting us, memories, thoughts. If they finish, Caven, we won't even remember what we were fighting for. His gaze hardened. The weight of command pressed like a star, collapsing inward. He could not afford hesitation, not now, not at the brink. Then we strike first, he said, before they finish pulling us apart, before the veil shatters completely. He keyed into the fleet-wide comms, his voice echoing across every surviving ship. This is Caven Row. The veil is gone, and what comes through it seeks not our surrender, but our unmaking. If we fall here, we do not fall as ghosts. We fall as ourselves. Hold to that truth. Hold to who you are. Let them feel the weight of human defiance. For a moment there was silence, and then, one by one, the fleet responded. Captains swearing loyalty, voices steadying, the storm of panic stilled by Caven's conviction. But outside, the rift grew ever wider, the presence loomed ever closer, and in its infinite shifting form, Caven saw the future of this war laid bare. There would be no retreat, no stalemate, no compromise. The veil was shattered, and so too soon would be everything else. The world outside had gone utterly still, not the peaceful stillness of dawn or snowfall, but the unnerving silence that comes when even the wind has nothing left to say. Peter stood alone in the wreckage of the listening station's command deck, his body a silhouette against the broken viewport, where glass and steel hung in jagged teeth. Beyond it, the earth shimmered, fractured with scars of fire and deep lingering shadows where cities once pulsed with light. The planet looked more like a dying ember than a home. The signal, that cursed, beautiful, damning broadcast that had started everything. He could still feel its resonance beneath his skin, as though some ghostly pulse had been woven into his veins. It had awakened the enemy. It had drawn the great machines from the void, and yet it had also led him here, to this exact place, where choice no longer bowed to history, only to will. Peter. A voice, soft, breaking through static. It wasn't over the comms. It was inside him. Emma's voice, or what remained of her inside the fragmented imprint she had left in the machines. She had become the echo of the signal itself, a spectral presence clinging to the fragments of circuitry and code. "You're not alone," his throat tightened. "I am," he whispered. But his voice cracked with the lie. The central console flickered, half dead, spitting sparks. A core unit remained intact, enough to trigger the failsafe buried beneath the station, enough to unleash the countersignal, the final act the architects of this place had prepared, long before Peter was born. But there was no guarantee what it would do. Silence them? Awaken them further? Or erase both humanity and machine alike in a single blinding instant? Peter pressed his palm against the console. His reflection stared back faintly in the cracked surface. Tired eyes, lined with ash and blood, and behind them the weight of every fallen name that had led him here, his crew, his family, every voice swallowed by the void. "Do you hear them?" Emma whispered again. "They're waiting." And he did, not with ears, but with the raw marrow of his being. Voices, millions of them, woven in the hum of dead circuits and fractured air. Not all were human. Some carried the metallic resonance of the machines, a language without breath, but filled with longing. They weren't simply destroyers, they were searching, just as humanity had searched among the stars. For a moment, Peter hesitated. He could still walk away, drift until oxygen thinned, let silence claim him instead of making a choice that might doom everything. But he remembered something his father once said before the wars, before the void swallowed their skies. Courage isn't the absence of fear, son. It's what you choose while afraid. His finger hovered over the console's activation switch. Time seemed to fold, each heartbeat louder than thunder. "I'm not choosing silence," Peter said at last, voice steady, almost calm. "Not anymore." He pressed the switch. A low vibration shuddered through the deck. Lights snapped alive, flaring white-blue, and the broken air filled with a rising hum that built into something almost symphonic. The counter-signal roared out across the void, not words, but a harmony that carried both grief and defiance, both memory and promise. It was humanity's last song, born of ruin, yet aimed at hope. The machines responded, not with an attack, not immediately. Across the dark horizon of space, where their vast silhouettes loomed like tombstones of steel, their formation trembled. Some began to retreat. Others stilled completely, as though listening. Peter fell to his knees, breath ragged, tears cutting lines through the soot on his face. He didn't know if he had saved them or doomed them. The outcome lay beyond his reach now, carried into the deep where signals danced between stars. But for the first time since the war began, the silence was broken, and in that sound, in that fragile resonance, there was possibility. The chamber was unlike anything Peter had seen in all his journeys through fractured space. It wasn't carved stone or engineered steel, but something in between, fluid walls that seemed to breathe, a ceiling so vast it faded into black, as if the stars themselves had been folded into the structure. Every sound, his heartbeat, the scrape of his boots, was swallowed into a hush, like the room demanded silence to even exist. At the center stood a figure, not entirely human, not entirely machine. Its body was elongated, shimmering with veins of crystalline light that pulsed in rhythm with Peter's own chest. Its face was obscured beneath a shifting mask, patterns of static flowing like broken transmissions. "You've carried the signal farther than any before you," the figure said, its voice a chorus of tones layered on top of each other. "But do you understand what it has cost?" Peter steadied himself, though his hands trembled. "I don't care about the cost. I need to know who sent it, who called me here." The figure tilted its head, studying him as though he were an experiment it had almost forgotten about. The last Earth signal was not merely a call, it was a fracture, a tear in memory itself. "We sent it, yes, but not from a place, from a time." The air shuddered. The chamber walls flickered, revealing visions, Earth before its fall, oceans blue and endless, skyscrapers lit with humanity's stubborn brilliance. Then war. Ash. The hollow silence that followed, Peter staggered back. "You're saying—" "The signal came from Earth's past," the architect's form brightened. "From a memory of Earth, a dying echo, desperate to be heard. We shaped it, gave it strength. But it was never meant for survival. It was meant for selection." "Selection?" The word tasted sharp in Peter's mouth. The figure's mask shifted, revealing for a heartbeat the ghost of a human face. His face, older, scarred. Only those who could carry the burden of memory could follow it. Only those who would not break. Peter's pulse thundered. The pieces began fitting together, horrible and perfect. Every trial, every sacrifice, every step across the void, it had all been designed. Not chance, not fate, a test. "You manipulated me," he whispered. "No." The architect's voice softened, like a dying flame. "We forged you." Peter's anger flared hot, but beneath it was a deeper, colder dread. If this architect had shaped him, then what was he truly fighting for? Earth's return or their design? The chamber trembled. Far above, the ceiling split open, revealing a void so wide it made him dizzy. Through it, Peter saw not stars, but countless signals, threads of light stretching across eternity, all converging on this single point. You are not the last. Peter, the architect said, stepping closer, its form unraveling into raw light. You are the first. The light surged into him, searing through every nerve, every memory, every scar. For an instant he felt infinite, every voice of earth, every laugh, every cry, every silence, flooding through him. The weight of billions of souls pressed against his mind. And then, darkness. When he opened his eyes, the chamber was gone. He stood alone in a new place, something vaster than space itself. And in the distance the echoes of earth still called, but now they were calling through him.